Hello, Mr. Fawcett. It is a pleasure to be with you.
Sam Marimba, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. As you know, we are having a discussion with those who are running for Allegheny County Executive. And my name is Marimba Milliones, President and CEO of the Hill Community Development Corporation, for those of you who don't know. We are focused on the revitalization of the historic Hill District neighborhood, which is the 1,100-acre neighborhood between the Central Business District and our Knowledge Center of Oakland. Mr. Fawcett is one of several candidates in the county executive race for Allegheny County. And I'm looking forward to this conversation, this one-on-one, to learn a little bit about him and his platform. As you all probably already know, the Hill CDC is a nonpartisan organization. This conversation is for the benefit of Hill District residents and other residents of the city and county, so that they can learn about how the county executive role will impact them in the Hill District neighborhood. So with that said, why don't we jump in, Mr. Fawcett, and tell me in 2 minutes or less a little bit about yourself and why you're running for county executive.
Sure. I'm Dave Fawcett. I grew up in Pittsburgh, a neighborhood called Shaler, and I'm a lawyer. As a lawyer, I've done a lot of jury trials across the country, holding corporations accountable. And I've also done a lot of work in the criminal justice sphere. I was 2 terms on the county council when it first started up, so I'm not a career politician, but I know a little bit about the county. And the way I see it is, right now in this region, and the region I'm running, is I know we have really, really big challenges. Look around, and everywhere you go, outside of the places that are flourishing, you'll see disparities of opportunity and wealth. You'll see racial disparities. You'll see de facto segregation, and so on. And on the other hand, I think at this point in time, we have tremendous opportunities. We don't have a blank canvas, but we really have something not too far away from that, where we can really shape our future. And, you know, my passions really are in 3 things. In addition to running the county, and have the sort of competence and qualifications to do that, I'm interested specifically in 3 things. One is criminal justice, and that would include crime, criminal justice, the jail. And I know all about it because I worked for years with the Pennsylvania Innocence Project. I've done pro bono work on behalf of, the accused and people who are wrongfully accused, and so on. So I know what needs to be done in that realm. But secondly, I'm really interested in and passionate about sustainability, and really sustainability as a way of revitalizing neighborhoods in our urban core. And I can't wait to talk to you about some of my specific ideas in that regard. I hope we have some questions there. And finally, the thing that I would really want to focus on is jobs. And every politician will talk about, well, I'm for jobs, but I've got a plan for keeping and generating manufacturing jobs here. And I think that's super important, because almost all of our problems that we have number one, we need more resources to address them. And secondly, jobs for people is really a priority. More, and particularly manufacturing jobs, I think is really essential. So all those are all reasons why I'm running. I think that our next leader has to be someone with skills like mine that I've developed as a lawyer, to be tough when you have to be tough, to negotiate when you have to negotiate, to work out solutions, and really have the knowledge and real life experiences, to get things done.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. So I'm going to jump right into the first question, which you already have started to address, which is that you were on county council. And my question is, how, as county executive, will you work with county council? And how will you work with the mayor of the city of Pittsburgh if elected?
Yeah. So when I was on the county council, it just started up. We used to have a 3-commissioner system, and then we went to a county executive and county council. And unlike today, we got a lot done. Where Republicans and Democrats worked closely together. We consolidated the row offices. We tightened air pollution regulations. I wrote an ethics code. We work closely with the county executive and fellow members of council across party lines, across the aisle, to get things done. So I think it's essential that the county executive work with the council, have open dialogue with the council, and honestly, that there be civility and an exchange of ideas. Once you go over that cliff of impoliteness or incivility, whatever you want to call it, it's not good, And as a lawyer, I'm used to dealing with people who are at odds and in conflict, but there's a way to handle yourself. In terms of working with the mayor, of course, I would respect his turf, so to speak. But Pittsburgh is a municipality within the county, and I think that a number of my initiatives, but principally the one I want to talk to you about, a countywide riverfront park, which would be a big economic driver, would be something that would help revitalize our city neighborhoods as well as our neighborhoods up and down our rivers, our declining industrial towns. And so that's something that, would be imperative that I work with the mayor with, and vice versa.
Thank you. So the next question I have for you is really about how the county executive, how a county executive Fawcett would respond to and engage with communities and neighborhoods specifically. Oftentimes that is a very distant relationship and somewhat of a hands-off relationship. And so I'm curious to know what your philosophy is on working in communities and working with communities.
Yeah. So my philosophy, I don't know if it's so much philosophy as practice. I think when you're a county executive, you're running a multi-billion-dollar operation with all kinds of issues popping up every day. And I think we've had good county executives who have worked hard, but I think it's very difficult to rise above and answer the question, okay, where do we want to be in 10 and 15 and 20 years, and what can we do now, to help us get there? And to me, with the time you have, it has to be focused on communities that are under-resourced. And I think you have to be stepping back and saying, what investments can we make to, one, even out past inequities and to provide opportunities? Because I'm all about raising the profile of this city through jobs and sustainability and big investments. But you can't have a beacon of sustainability or an innovation hub in a place where people want to live without addressing our deep disparities of wealth and income and race. And that's really a matter of getting into the communities. You honestly don't have time to get into every community in Allegheny County. There's hundreds of them, but you do want to focus on those where it's appropriate, and particularly to address, inequities that have been caused by past governmental misconduct, like the Hill District, and that's where you have a responsibility to put your emphasis there. Now, I think, and not to say too much, and I think you're probably a bigger expert at this than I am, but again, when you come into communities as the county executive, you want to be a leader, and you want to lead by example, and you want to show the importance of what's being done. I don't think you want to try to dominate, and you want to get people on the same page and rowing in the same direction. And I know that's real easy to say, but just being there and being that spokesperson and that cheerleader for progress and change, and saying I'm there with resources and to help, I think that's super important.
All right, thank you. Can you tell me a little bit about the kind of public and community engagement and participation that you would advance or manage at the county level? One of the things that we are experiencing is limited opportunity to engage either at the board level or at the commission level. Still, as a result of the COVID pandemic, lots of folks are still meeting digitally. Can you speak a little bit about how you would lead through ensuring that the public is heard and participating?
Well, listen, we have big, important boards and authorities. If that's what you're referring to,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the PRT, the bus system, the airport, the sports and exhibition authorities, well, there's so many of them. I do think the appointments historically have gone to oftentimes a narrow group of people. And I think you have to be very cognizant of having diversity and more than that, people that aren't just, people that have donated a lot of money to a campaign, for example. I'm one of the people in this race who have talked about campaign finance reform. I had a career fighting corruption in the judicial system, including taking a case to the U.S. Supreme Court over campaign improprieties and winning. But I think it's really important that we have those kind of checks and balances on the appointment to boards, and then that we have people who are representative of the people who are served by the authority organization. So, for example, and it maybe is a small one, but if you look at the Port Authority, or the PRT as it's known now, I think one of my requirements of people on that board would be that they have some experience riding buses, and using public transportation or knowing something about it, as opposed to, oh, I'm a businessman and I gave to your campaign. That would be an example. And you'd probably want to have someone, riders of all sorts, really. So that would be an example. But I think that's been a problem. I think, with COVID, it's been exacerbated. But clearly, it's the county executive that sets the tone. And, there are boards who I think and board members who feel that it's it's their job and really they don't want other people to butt in. And that wouldn't be under my administration. I think board members have to understand that they're working for the people, not the other way around.
Thank you. So, can you talk to me a little bit about how you would handle both the unemployment and underemployment issues that are faced within the Hill District neighborhood, but also the need to attract jobs, as you mentioned before, and how you will ensure that employers are getting their needs met, because there are a lot of vacancies, as I'm sure you know, throughout the county when it comes to available jobs. And then there's also some pretty steep unemployment and underemployment in certain census tracts and demographics. Can you tell me a little bit about how you would approach solving that challenge and that issue?
Yeah, I think I differ a little from some of the other candidates in this regard. I think, without a doubt, we need to do everything possible to keep jobs here and to gain more jobs. And I said that at the outset, but let me explain a little bit. For example, we are known worldwide as being an innovation center and a hub of technology, and that's principally through the innovations that in technology that have occurred at Carnegie Mellon and our Robotics Institute. And we've just lost so many jobs over the years. We know that's being documented, but it's estimated that the jobs that are going to be created by these innovations, including in the robotics industry, are going to be 10 to 12 times what the jobs were, the manufacturing jobs were in the auto industry when it was at its peak. In other words, there are a ton of jobs are going to be produced, but what's happening right now, we're innovating here and the jobs are going elsewhere. So right now, they're going to Baltimore, to Cincinnati, to Columbus, Ohio, into Rochester, New York. Columbus, Ohio is building chip manufacturing plants, and Rochester, New York, the same. Well, these are jobs we can't afford to lose. We need to bring them here, and they'll be manufacturing jobs. And then we have to pair that with, the training and education of people, and especially younger people in high school and college and community college folks, so that they can work in these industries. Now, there are some candidates who say, well, look, we need to make this a better place and have cooperation and do this and that. But no, I think we need a plan, and then we need someone to work that plan, and someone who can negotiate the arrangements and to say, okay, how are we going to attract these businesses or keep them here, and why are they going elsewhere? So to me, it's a big deal. And I think my experience as a lawyer, knowledgeable of business, including the good and bad in business, is important there. To get to the negotiation table with businesses and companies that might come here. And by the way, if you talk to folks you and I know, they'll talk about, well, you can have startups and you can have business, but what are the jobs going to be? And is this going to be, a few guys and women getting rich, from a startup? Or is this going to be a more of a sharing, fair arrangement where there's real good jobs? And that's the job of a county executive. At least that's the job I would play, is coming in and say, looking at these businesses, saying, okay, what are you bringing to the community? Not what are you bringing for yourself or what are you hoping to take, but what are you bringing? But we can't sit back and say, oh, we don't want the corporations, or we don't need to try to attract them here. We do, but then it's a matter of working hard to make sure that what results is something that you really want.
Right.
And I think that affects the Hill, that affects all the, every place. And, you can go on and on about, getting around transportation, the underserved communities. You need to make sure all those pieces fit together so people can be employed. And then we grow our resources so that we have more money to tackle our big problems.
So tell me a little bit about your philosophy around why we do have the kind of unemployment that we have in certain areas, even though there are opportunities that exist. Like, how would you lead through solving that problem?
Well, I'm not sure this is the answer to your question, but I think there's areas of this county that obviously were in long decline, and you need a revitalization. What does that mean? What can government do to help that along? And how can you make places really attractive to live and work outside of our outer ring suburbs? In the very, downtown, what do you do? To me, it's big investments, and it's big investments. I talked before about, sustainability for the purpose of revitalization. And, one of the ideas I have along those lines is a countywide riverfront park. And when I was on the county council, I actually had an ordinance passed empowering the county to create a 10th county park, which would be a linear park that would run along one side or the other of every major river with bridge connections. And it'd be a matter of moving back the rail lines. Right now, we use our riverfronts in our urban core and everywhere else for big business and for railroads. We don't need to do that. We don't have the manufacturing here. So it's a matter of pushing those lines back and putting in not just little trails, but a major linear park. And when that happens, first of all, we have existing housing stock in the Hill and everything from McKeesport to Duquesne and Etna, Millvale, and Sharpsburg and on up and down in Coriopolis and so on. Well, when you put this park in, the greatest urban linear park in the world, and you could get outside of your existing house, and get onto this great linear park and actually commute by bicycle or walking and go anywhere along the rivers, and then have perpendicular connections. The county, at my urging, has finally is acquiring the Brilliant Line, which is a railroad that runs from Bakery Square over to Asimov. And that will be converted to essentially a bikeway and walkway. And now when that happens and you have the backbone of a countywide riverfront park in place, you can now get out of your house, not just in Shady Side or Squirrel Hill, but in Lincoln Larimer or Homewood, and get on the greatest linear park in the world and get yourself around and commute. And that's the kind of thing that I think is a big idea. It never was implemented, even though we have the ordinances on the book. And it's a big idea where we're spending money, federal, state, county money, philanthropic money, to build something that's an investment and going to make places more livable, including not Cranberry and not, the places out in Plum and so on, but our urban core, make it even more attractive so that we're building on our natural advantages, our beautiful city, our rivers, and our green hills. So it's the kind of thing that's a big investment. And, people that are looking to come here or stay here are looking around to see, what are we putting into this city, and are we making use of it? Are they going to stay here or go to Columbus, Ohio or Baltimore? So we need to fight for jobs. And part of that is, seeking the companies, but also seeking to address our issues that keep, drive people out.
Thank you. So you talked about big investments, and one of the big investments happening in our neighborhood is the Lower Hill District. All right, the Lower Hill District is a, as you know, 28-acre site in the foot of our neighborhood with a very complex history involving the displacement of 8,000, residents, mostly Black. 430 or so businesses were displaced, 1,200 buildings demolished. Originally, it was 100 acres of land that was cleared through federally funded urban renewal. Can you tell me a little bit about how you will, what your perception of that project is, and how you'll lead through the redevelopment of that site?
Well, I'll start with my perception of the situation to begin with. The situation that is faced by the Hill was replicated across this country. Mm-hmm. And you, if you read the book, The Color of Law, which I'm sure you have, by Richard Rothstein, and you read The New Jim Crow, and you read The Condemnation of Blackness, you learn some things. And, I always thought, as a guy that grew up in Shaler, I thought that what my teacher said was true. Well, there was white flight, and, African Americans left in the city because, others wanted to get away. Well, that might have been true in some situations, but the truth is, no, it was our government and our banks that precluded African Americans from moving. And so I only say that so you have some sense that of what I understand the issue to be, and I do understand it in this regard. Our government, our federal government down to our local governments and our county and our banks, caused the problem that we now see and we see as racial segregation. We're one of the most segregated cities in the country. And, it has its roots in that whole system. So to me, and sorry, I didn't mean to ramble on about that too long, but look, you're dealing with a very particular part that is like the epicenter of injustice, historical injustice, racial and economic injustice, and really damn near crushing of a culture and a community. So you're doing the hard work. You know all about it. You know how difficult it is. What am I to say? But I am concerned anytime I see. I love the park. I will walk through that regularly. I like I'm talking about the new park that's a sort of the segue, and I see the building FNB's tower going up. But I worry, what is the effect on a community? And so through the hard work of people like you that there's hopefully going to be affordable housing and green space, and not gentrification that tosses people out, not making it like the Naval Yards down in DC off of Capitol Hill, or the other places that are just, they're not big box. Well, I guess they are big box apartment buildings. you know, so these are complicated issues, but I think it takes what I started, I think it takes what I started saying earlier, which is this. The county executive's role, in my opinion, we got all these millions of issues day to day, running the county, running the city. But I think we want a leader who can step back and say, what are we doing for our city, our county, and our neighborhoods? Where do we want to be in 10 and 15 and 20 years? What do we want to look like? You know, and we have examples of places where we've revitalized, and we know the lesson. It didn't work. I think in something that happened in my lifetime, and you were probably a baby, maybe not, but you know, the waterfront was said to be a great development. I don't think there was a vision there. I mean, there wasn't an idea that, hey, there might someday be a countywide riverfront park that, and somehow we're going to have all this money in development, not just in fast food and retail, but, you know, something that's integrated into the neighborhood, in that case, Homestead and West Mifflin, you know, and that, I don't want to say it's worse than anything could be, but it's not what it could be. And I do think it's the job of the county executive, the leader in this county, to say, what can we be? And let's aspire to be something that's fair and equitable and just, not just, hey, let's, you know, pave it over and put up some apartment buildings. So I commend you for sure, and everyone in the Hill CDC, and with the very difficult task of doing what I do for a living, negotiating with power and money. You know, it's not easy. Yeah. You know, I happen to be, I hold corporations accountable. I've gotten some of the bigger verdicts in the country in years, and typically for people or businesses who have been run out of business by bigger businesses who abuse their power. Well, there's no people who are more vicious than people fighting over money. And I tell you, I got deep experience in criminal justice too. And it's people fighting over whether they're going to be in jail for 20 years or life. Don't always fight as vigorously as people who want to hold on to their money or keep some at the end. So that takes a lot of skill and power, a lot of skill and negotiation and being tough when you have to be tough. The kind of things that I've done in my career. And I know I'm running on, but I want to say this. You know, this election is going to be all about, again, I think having big ideas, but also a plan to get there, and then the skills, the knowledge and the life skills to allow you to make things happen. And that's why I say I'm the doer in this race. I'm going to get things done. That's what I've done my whole career, and that's why I'm running.
Thank you. So you said a lot there.
Yeah, too much. Sorry.
No, it was helpful. It was very helpful.
Okay.
I appreciate the insight into some of the things that you've read and some of the things that you believe. Fundamentally, I can tell you that a lot of residents are feeling a bit underrepresented when it comes to achieving equitable results, and a lot of that obviously has to fall on appointed and or elected representation, and the outcomes that we get are almost always directly tied to appointed and or elected representation. And so it's helpful to understand, your thinking there. One of the things that, go ahead.
Can we jump in, because it might be a good segue, maybe it's not on your list of questions, to talk about that dynamic in the criminal justice arena in our courts? Absolutely.
Let me get to that one. Okay. There are a couple of other questions around economic development I want to get through, and then we'll talk about that. And if we don't get to it for whatever reason, I'd like for you to weave it into a future question. Okay. One of the residents in our area has been circulating something called a pledge to the people, right? Because it feels like on some of these big development sites, at the end of the day, it does end up being mostly about jobs and capital. right? Not necessarily what's in the best interest of everyone involved, and or the neighborhood that has suffered the greatest level of either disinvestment or injustice. And so to that point, one of the boards that is critical, as you know, to the Lower Hill District is the Sports and Exhibition Authority, who owns the site, and the county executive and the mayor are responsible for appointments on that board and other boards and commissions. And so you talked a little bit about making sure that there's diversity and access and thinking to those appointments, and that you want to make sure that people who are experienced and thoughtful are participating. Have you given any thought to how you would actually solicit, board members and commissioners, and how you would, from a tactical standpoint, have you given any thought to how you would approach that? And if so, what's your thinking there?
Yeah, so I guess it depends on the size of the board, and on the Sports and Exhibition Authority, I forget how many members there are, but 5
under
or 9.
10 for sure.
Yeah,
it's under 10 for sure.
Yeah. I think you have to have an idea in your mind as to what you want that to look like ultimately, and who you want to be represented, and then I think you want to have not just rely on your own judgment, but have a vetting process. One, not exclusively on people, but on the sort of representation you're going to have. So said differently, Sports and Exhibition Authority, who are affected most by the PNC Park and the, well, it's more than the arena, it's the whole Lower Hill, and obviously it's got to be residents of the area, and it's got to be the downtown community, whether that's law firms or businesses, and it's all sorts of groups. Now you might only have 5 or 7 appointments, but you sure don't want to have homogeneity. You want to have a variety. So I think it's a little bit delicate, because you want, as the county executive, you're ultimately going to make the appointment, and you can't have an appointment by a big committee, because you might never get the appointments, and you might have disagreement, but you sure as hell want to have input. And I think you want to have transparency. Whether you'd have hearings or not, I don't know. I think there's just too many board positions, but I do think that then that makes it very important to have a transparent process where you're saying, look, these are sort of the slots we have to fill, and we're looking for, this person. It might be from labor, it might be this person from, as a resident, this person from business, and get your combination. This person of this ethnicity. I don't mean specifically, but that represents the community. So I think that's really important, and it's super important for the purpose of having credibility. There's so many things in government that, and this is the same as in the courts. You have judges who say, well, I can be fair and so on. Well, we're in elections. Well, yeah, but we need to see that it's fair, and we can't depend on one person's judgment, and we want input on it too. So there's got to be a means to have some input on what these boards should look like before they're filled out. And, I would look to people like you for insight as to how to make that work. I know the county executive has a ton of appointments to make, and I think in the past some have rushed through that and have tried to fill seats, but gosh, it's a big responsibility, and you hope there's more to it than that.
Absolutely. Thank you. So let's jump to one of your passion issues, which is criminal justice, and then also just like some direct tactical strategies that you might employ as county executive to address the spike in crime activity that we're experiencing. And I always like to remind people that we're experiencing a spike in crime nationally, but it's particularly acute here. And so would like to know what what your strategy and your thinking is around how we will address the activity that's happening here, and then from a broader level, your philosophy on criminal justice, including but not limited to how to deal with children who are engaged in crime and activity as such, how they should be handled, how to handle the criminalization of children and/or the remediation of children, and how where should they be in the existing county jail? Should they be placed in a separate center? Those are some of the things I'd like to hear you reflect on in this upcoming answer.
Yeah, thanks. So it is my passion, and you've got about 4 or 5 questions in there, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try to give you my overall philosophy, and then give some specifics and be specific about what I'm saying. So look, government's number one job is to keep people safe to the extent possible, and where there's a spike in crime, it's intolerable. At the same time, and I'll come back to that, but there's two parts of what we'll call government's role with crime, and one is keeping people safe. So crime prevention, if you want to call it that. But on the other hand, the credibility of the system, which I talked about before, and that means having a level playing field, which it is not for the accused. Having accountability, which there is none, for the bad apples that ruin the system, and again, in this hand, with the jail, which I know all about. I brought a lawsuit against the county for its treatment of pregnant inmates in the jail and worked that issue out. But you can't balance those things. Those each are separate things that you can't compromise. So safety, and then what I'll call criminal justice on the other side. And they go hand in hand in a way, because when you lose credibility on one side, with a lack of accountability or allowing bad apples to do the things they do without accountability, well, that's a real problem on the other side, and it creates a crazy cycle, as you probably know. But I think real quickly on what's the county executive's role relative to crime, and particularly crime in the city. Well, it's technically a city issue, but from my standpoint, the county executive would have to be a leader and get involved immediately. And like they did in Detroit, in Cincinnati, when there was a spike in crime, the county executive, I think in one case, and maybe the mayor in the other, went to gotten real involved and got the corporate community involved and said, hey, this is not, this is not just our problem, this is everyone's issue. And we need more resources. And, the leaders took charge there and got the resources they need, and none of this, hey, we've got this problem. No, we got to take care of it, particularly for Pittsburgh post-pandemic, and town is emptying out and just coming back. It would be horrible if we allow this spike in crime and the perception of a spike in crime. It's horrible from so many standpoints, including the most basic, which is economic and the safety aspect of it. So that, I think, is just something that you can't compromise on. With criminal justice, though, I tell you, I've walked men out of jail who were sentenced to life in prison for crimes they didn't commit, and it was the result of government misconduct. It was the result of bad prosecutors and bad cops, bad investigators. Give you an example. I represented a guy who ATF. Who was accused of arson, and it was a kid that was up. His house burnt down when he was 17 up in Homewood, and it was a furnace fire. But the ATF came in and they wanted to pin it on someone, and they ended up offering a 15-year-old kid, directionless, fatherless, young 14-year-old with a record at that age, $15,000 if he would come and testify. And he did, and said, oh yeah, he overheard, what became my client, say that he did it. Boom, my client's in jail for life. And I represent juvenile offenders who were convicted of second-degree homicide because they were in a situation where a friend did something horrible, and whoops, you were along on the ride, you get sentenced at age 14, 15, 16, 17, a life in prison, which our Supreme Court has ruled, is unconstitutional. So I've been involved in a resentencing of juveniles. And listen, let me get to the point. It's not an even playing field in the criminal justice system. If you're accused here and you face the backlogs you do, and if you're a minority, you've got a big problems, and we need resources. And me as a lawyer and someone with experience, I'm not just waving the flag of, we need criminal justice. I know exactly what needs to be done. We need to create a conviction integrity unit, a CIU, like they did in Baltimore and Philadelphia. Takes us 10 years at the Innocence Project to get a handful of people, who are innocent but in jail, released. And you can create a conviction integrity unit, and that's government reviewing their convictions. And if there's problems, they take action on their own. They don't have to be sued and go through all these proceedings. And that's super important. We need to stop overcharging young kids with felonies. We need to up the money that's paid to lawyers and experts who come in to represent indigent accused. So, right now, court-appointed lawyers, guess what the pay is for taking on a case that might even involve murder, representing someone on an indigent basis? It's a couple $1,000s, and it's sickening. I in cases I work on, I spend weeks and weeks and sometimes years and years on. And here you got someone accused of something that could carry a serious penalty, including life, and you got a lawyer you're going to give him a couple $1,000s. He's not going to have time to investigate and do the job. So anyway, those are things I'm very familiar with and would take action on. And I guess I went on to say that I know, like other areas, it's not just that I'm saying there's something wrong here that needs to be fixed, but I have the plan to do it. I know exactly what needs to be done.
Thank you. So I definitely want to just comment that one of the things that, I've come to realize is that the district attorney's budget is much larger than the public defender. It's just not even close to equitable. Right. So the district attorney is somewhere like at 22 million, and I think the public defender is less than 5. I'd have to go back and see it again. Either way, it stood out as a marked disparity from my vantage point. So I'd love to get your perspective on, how you would approach some of the issues around equity in budgeting. But we have some more questions to get through, so I don't want to go too deep into that, but I wanted to know if you had any comments on that.
Yeah, as quick as I can. You need more resources. And, in other areas, Philadelphia is one of them, where the public defender hasn't have the proper resources. It's been supplemented by grants and by contributions from philanthropic and so on. So right now, our PDs are totally overwhelmed, and they're underpaid. Now their pay is going up a bit, but you need to apply resources, especially to an area that, I think historically politicians wouldn't really get involved because there's no upside to them necessarily. But to me, it's an injustice that I've seen and lived through. And again, I know what I would do. And a big part of it is it's just a resource issue. It's the same at the jail and it's the same at Schumann. Like it's not whether you just keep the warden or fire the warden. No, you got a bigger issue than that. It's called a human resources issue. You got to pay people more. You got to get better qualified people in. You got to get mental health workers in, both in policing and in the jail, more active. Those things cost a lot of money. So you have to make those hard decisions, and I'm not going to be one to shy away from them to say, oh well, this money goes to the prosecutor, not to the PD.
So to that point, I want you to address the comment that I made earlier about children and how whether or not they should be housed at the Allegheny County Jail or if there should be a separate facility. But I also want to loop in a couple of more questions. So let you get that one so I don't layer on too many at once.
Well, certainly there, in my opinion, I think there has to be a juvenile detention facility, whether that's a floor in the jail or that's a separate facility. But these often are for kids who are accused and not convicted. And so listen, you have to walk that line. You can't. You have to have it. We do have violent offenders, including kids, and they have to be detained. And I've heard people say otherwise, but where you have violence, regardless of the cause, you can't allow that to occur and not specifically having a detention facility. And then, of course, once you have one, well, what does it look like, and how is it resourced, and what are the resources that you're putting in terms of addiction counselors, mental health workers, and so on. And the same is true with the jail. When they built the jail, they probably should have built an addiction center next to it, and would stop cycling addicts or people with mental disorders through the jail. That's not the proper use of a jail.
So thank you for that. One of the things that has become very clear is that the Department of Human Services, DHS, has the large majority of the county budget, right?
Right.
And so that in some ways is a very good thing because it's a human-centered thought process. I think my question to you is how are metrics attached to budgeting and to specific departments where we are very much reliant on the high functioning potential of those departments in order for our county to be healthy and our county to be whole. So I'd like to get your thoughts on how you would approach measuring outcomes, particularly as it relates to budgeting. I think that's a really important question for our county right now. And while I'm at it, I do want to speak to the fact that economic development is less than 1% of the total county budget, which is astounding. But if you could speak to the first portion of the question, that'd be great.
Well, yeah, I think you know more than me about that. I don't know the metrics of what are you saying, measuring outcomes and applying that to budgetary considerations. And a lot of these are federal and state dollars coming down through. So remember, I just haven't given that a lot of thought, and I don't want to run my mouth on something I don't know what I'm talking about.
Understood.
But yeah, I would say this. I know, a lot of the discretionary money that we spend in this county, a lot's not discretionary. So it is like Health and Human Services, but we spend a bunch of discretionary money on the jail, okay? And the way we've spent that money has not resulted by any metric in good outcomes, okay? That's a fancy way to say we are throwing money down the toilet and causing injustice every day. And that probably happened originally out of, I don't know what you want to call it, negligence, people not paying attention or whatever. But look, the spotlight's on it now. And I was, when I became a candidate, that was one of the things I learned. Wow, that's a big part of our discretionary budget. And here we are, we don't have mental health workers there, not sufficient. We don't have addiction centers. We don't have the sufficient mental health counselors. So the result of it is we're cycling through, again, addicts and people with mental disorders through the jail, and everyone's overwhelmed. Well, yeah. Bring in an expert from outside, an independent expert, tell us what we need to do, tell us what the resources are. And if you reduce the jail population, which you surely hope to do when you put in proper evidence-based programs, then you're going to have more money to spend on other things.
Yeah, thank you. I think that is the question I was trying to get at, is how do you ensure that our investments are accounted for on the outcome side?
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's specific to be clear, DHS in any way, shape, or form. It's just that they are a huge chunk of the total county budget. And so, you know, it's important to kind of like just think through that. And so, you know, ultimately, whoever leads the county, it is very clear that there's not, as a resident and as a community member who's involved in a number of civic activities, that there doesn't seem to be kind of as much focus on the outcomes, the strategy, as there may be to just kind of like continuing to drive that budget in the direction that it has been for some time.
And Marimba, let's pick up on your comment earlier that, hey, the economic development's 1% of the budget. And I would add that historically, I'm not saying about what's going on now, but I know historically there were patronage jobs in economic development department. Well, think about that. That's insane. Now, these places that are getting jobs and keeping jobs, I said Rochester, New York, and Columbus. Well, Rochester, Governor Cuomo had a plan where he had pad-ready sites and he identified things, and their spending was enormous on economic development, and he took some heat on for it. And the same with Columbus. But the result is, hey, that was really a good payment because they're competing with cities like Pittsburgh that don't have the equivalent and are losing jobs. You know, I just think you do have to have metrics tied to these outcome, based metrics.
Right. And I think they should be fair. I mean, you know, if someone said, hey, next year, Marimba, you've got to have 25 homeowners and rehab 25 homes in order to, right, secure this funding, I think that it has to be a conversation. I think that there has to be a qualitative and quantitative conversation around budgeting and outcomes with the people who do the work day to day, but also, the taxpayers. And so at any rate, this is more about what you believe and not about what I believe.
Can we say one other thing? Sure. Same with our transportation. Mm-hmm. Please, let's talk about that for a second. We're spending all this money, $1.5 million or $2 million a day, and people can't get, older people can't get to their doctor's appointments, and people maybe in your neighborhood and mine can't get to job sites because we run buses in and out of town, which I know is important, but we aren't getting, we have low ridership. So to me, what's the metric there? What metric do you apply? It has to be use, that is ridership levels. And when it's going right, when you see a big rise in ridership. So that's an example to me of a metric. You don't cut funding, but you also don't spend money without any results.
Right. So it's interesting. That is a great example of my next kind of set of questions here. So you may or may not know that over the next 5 to 7 years, a lot of the affordable housing units in the county, their compliance period to maintain affordability will expire. And there are a few things that can happen when that happens. One is, private developer may decide they're going to, kind of flip a development to market, right? They may work with a nonprofit or government to find a new owner, because largely the corporate interest at that point has secured their tax benefit, right? So whether or not they're going to renew or re-syndicate, as we say in the business, a deal at that point is a big question mark. And so my question to you is, and let me take that and connect that to what you were just talking about, which is really about connecting the metrics of, ridership to perhaps a funding model, right? That's one way that, it can be reviewed and analyzed. Another consideration is that a lot of people are being pushed out to less densely populated areas because there's a lack of affordable housing. And so the ridership may be low on those particular routes because everybody hasn't been pushed out yet, but you're going to start to see an increase in that. And how do we ensure that everybody has equitable protections around what's happening, because it's really all connected. And a lot of it is really rooted in housing insecurity. And so anyway, I wanted to get your thoughts about affordable housing and how we're going to keep Allegheny County affordable, and specifically the Hill District neighborhood, particularly given its location between two of the state's top economic generators.
Well, here's the lens I think you have to look at this through. You're talking about a developer or someone that's built something and gets a tax benefit or a break. And, we see this all through government. I think that at the outset, when you're giving a money-making enterprise a benefit, you have to make sure that you're getting the return that you could be getting. And we see this all the time, that, okay, we've given a benefit in a short term, and then after it's up, there's not a long-term, there's no long-term stick to the original agreement. You might think it's far-flung, but I'll give you a little sports analogy. We built the PNC Park, and the owners of the Pirates have abused it so that they are reaping enormous personal wealth, and it's hurting the city economically, what they're doing to decimate the team and the team brand. Well, that should have probably been dealt with at the outset, saying, we're not going to have this. We're not giving you the best baseball park in America so that you can just make a ton of money. Okay, lawyers and businessmen can figure that stuff out. Let's take your situation with affordable housing. I mean, I think it's the same thing. You're talking about, well, people might develop it or flip it. Well, that should be dealt with up front. And and I think we should be pushing for rules and regulations that have some foresight to them and say, no, there's got to be, we're invested in this and we're invested together. And I don't know if it's possible, but I know in some situations you have community ownership or the opportunity of it, or actual ownership, which to me seems like the way to go where possible, so that people actually create wealth through the ownership of real property, which historically, as was people of color were deprived of being able to do. So why are we giving the TIF in the first place, or the community? The affordable housing tax break. Why are we designating a district blighted? Well, yeah, it gets people in, but we in some positive growth. But 5 or 10 years pass, and you need to make sure that benefit of the bargain sticks. So that's the example you gave, and I think it is up to the county executive again to assure that. No, we're not going to we're not going to give a break for 5 or 10 years and then say, okay, now it's okay to force the residents out because they can't afford it. Mm-hmm. That just doesn't seem right.
Thank you for that. So I would certainly, I got to get to your final questions, but I would certainly encourage you and be curious to know if you'd be, willing to stand up some type of affordable housing, either commission or task force to advance fair housing, to, ensure long-term affordability of our county. This is not just a Hill District issue or even just a city issue. This issue is going to become more and more serious as time goes along. So that's a quick question, and wonder if you've given that any thought. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Excellent. No, I think it's a good idea.
Excellent. So to one of your favorite discussions, bus rapid transit is a transportation project. I know you're passionate about the transportation topic as well. Bus rapid transit, as you probably know, connects downtown to Oakland through the Hill District neighborhood of Uptown. And as a result, it was completely rezoned. And all of that zoning does not comply with the Greater Hill District Master Plan, which is our guiding document as a community. But that transportation project is moving forward, and one may say it's less of a transportation project than it is a economic development project. But with that said, we're seeing lots of spikes in rent there as well. So I'd just like to get your thinking on bus rapid transit in general, and how you're thinking about transportation.
Yeah. So just in terms of my knowledge of it, I mean, I was a bus rider from college through, 20 years of practicing law. And I've rode packed buses in and out of town, and then the bus routes got changed, and the ridership was taken down to about zero from packed buses. And, that sort of sticks in your craw because, now people are getting in their cars and are used to it and aren't using it. So I see that all over. So I'm talking about this situation coming in from Verona and Oakmont, where we used to go down to the busway, and now we circle all over. So a 25-minute ride turns into an hour ride, and people just don't ride the bus. And then you have places like McKeesport. You have the same thing. Most of the buses are winding all around, some of them, and then, a couple go into town. But we have to be thinking again about what are the needs of people, and particularly people who are under-resourced and underprivileged, and they're most in need of good public transportation. When I say good public transportation, I mean something to get them where they got to go efficiently, and I have many ideas along those lines. I think I would push to have our employers make transportation free for their employees as a benefit. For example, our nonprofits in Oakland, if you know any nonprofits up there, I mean, that would be a nice benefit. You get the bus ride free, and that's all over the county. And there was a time when a lot of employers did that. I would encourage that. But also then employers, and I think like our ridership is going to say, well, yeah, but it still has to be efficient to some degree. People want to have to ride it. So that's one thing. I think transportation isn't limited to buses, and I don't think it should be. Somehow the other options have gotten out of our conversation. We talk about light rail, and I think we should continue to explore it northeast as well as south. And I think I talked about something that I think is important here is a countywide riverfront park where you could actually get out of your car, lessen carbon footprint, and commute, and get yourself from really anywhere to anywhere along the river or along a creek bed where there's an actual linear park that allows you to get around. But those are creative, big ideas that can really help move us towards a more equitable county and a more sustainable one. And look, it's our poorer neighbors that have suffered from the lack of sustainability. We know that. And sustainability includes not just, for example, affordable housing, but also access to transportation, access to green space, access to, yes, linear parks, and being able to have multiple means of transportation. So it's all in the mix, but transportation certainly is a big part of that. And somehow we've, I think, lost our way a little bit. We're not thinking big enough. Our ambitions are, in that regard, are too low. I think we should have great, if we want to be a beacon of sustainability, want to have jobs here and an innovation center and so on, we need to have, great public transportation, for everyone. In particular,
thank you.
Yeah.
So I would be remiss if I didn't take this moment to advocate for a circular, so to speak, that connects the Hill District to downtown. People oftentimes say, they say the Hill District. Lots of people know about the Hill District, but unless you have tried to walk the Hill District, you may not realize just how tough it is to traverse on foot. Particularly if you are either limited in your mobility or of somebody who who is aged. And so I would certainly encourage, that kind of thinking of how we can get people moving between downtown and Oakland and the Hill District. And it may not be a bus. The bus solution may not be the right solution, but we've got to get folks from, the steep terrain of Bedford Avenue, even down to Center Avenue, downtown and back up, without having to wait 45 minutes, right, for the next bus, or, essentially for it to take half a day to get downtown and back. And so that's just something I have to throw a quick ad in for. But I know that
need to get to Hazelwood, need to get to Millvale, lots of places. You need to get around. You can't be isolated in the urban core. That's thinking big. Yeah, I like that.
All right, excellent. So these questions
and
are
I am a little short on time, so
I understand.
I have a forum to get to. But
okay, I'm gonna ask these 3 questions really quickly, and you can you take 1 minute to answer each. They're intended to be quick. So the first thing is, what are the top 3 things, and you can consolidate into one statement, that you're going to do for Hill District seniors. And the next question is, what are the top 3 things you're going to do for Hill District children?
Okay, I think both. Again, it's a matter of having the amenities that should be there and that the county can help with. I mean, I think that's you're talking about walkways, you're talking about access to green space, you're talking about affordable housing. These are all things that fit into the equation. Any way the county can help, I'm for. Again, I think when you have big resources like the county has, and the tax base, it's not just the city, but the whole county, that needs to be applied equitably. And, it certainly isn't in our school districts. That's a whole nother issue. But, you need to have special emphasis on what investments you can make in, underachieving, economically hurt neighborhoods.
Okay. And the last question is, what makes you the leader that Hill District residents and people from communities like ours should choose?
Yeah. So I talked to you before. I think I have good knowledge of what's led us to where we are as a country and in here locally. I do believe in thinking globally, acting locally, and the kind of things that the Hill District has suffered over the past 50 years epitomizes what's happened across the country. I know that. I understand it. I know the history of it. I know the involvement of government in causing the decline of the Hill. I know the participation, as I said, of the banks and of corporations in that. And it was a big injustice, an enormous one. And I'm the kind of person, I guess I'd say it this way, that I express myself not by necessarily protesting or waving a flag of protest. I'm all for it, but my career has been seeing injustice and taking it on and getting things done. And again, I've fought some of the biggest, meanest, baddest corporations in the country, and I understand how to be tough when you got to be really tough, and then how to negotiate out solutions for the betterment of people. So I think it's important in this job, when you're talking about, honestly, power and money, and isn't that what you deal with a ton of it in the Hill District, and big interest and big money making interest? It's not about, with our nonprofits, it's not about just taking a stand or protesting. It's about really being tough and then doing whatever you can to get people on the same side in the move for the betterment of everyone. And that's what I'm going to do. I mean, that's what I've done my whole career. And I think it takes experience, it takes knowledge, it takes real life experiences, and it takes integrity. And finally, it takes a passion for it. And I certainly am passionate about remedying historical wrongs. And that would be at the top of my list. So that's, I think I'm the best choice if you're looking for action as opposed to words.
And on that note, Mr. Fawcett, thank you so much for your time. I've enjoyed the conversation. And Yeah, we appreciate you giving some insight into who you are and what your vision is for Allegheny County and the Hill District. And have a good afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Marimba.
Bye-bye.